all women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts: the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, and the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus Delendis 8. Understanding Qualia, a comprehensive guide, written by Conrad Riker, available now, links in description. Understanding Qualia, a field guide for men who still notice reality. My chaos is my personality disorder. Unmasking the satanic Lilith delusion, the BPD sadism of the cold tea investigation, and the biological suicide of the feral maternal. A woman once told me she was gathering data about my soul because I made her tea. She held the cup I had steeped for her, loose leaf, because I had remembered her preference from a conversation weeks prior, and she let it go cold. She sat there, watching steam die between us, and she called this silence methodology. She called her refusal to drink genius. I drank the tea myself. It was excellent, and I understood in that moment that I was not in the presence of a sphinx posing riddles to worthy suitors. I was in the presence of a toddler who had learned that knocking over blocks makes adults pay attention. The difference is that toddlers eventually learn to build something. This woman had made a career out of knocking things down and calling the rubble a philosophy. I want you to understand what you just witnessed in that story, because you have lived it. You have sat across from a woman who punished you for virtue. You have watched her interpret your kindness as coercion, your memory as surveillance, your patience as weakness. You have been told that your very existence in a room makes the room fraudulent because you stand taller than she does. You have been called an oppressor for brewing tea. And if you are like most men reading this, you spent years believing you were the problem, years apologizing for the crime of having a center while she spun in orbit around nothing, calling her dizziness a compass. What follows is an autopsy of a lie. We are going to take apart, bolt by bolt and word by word, the ideology that tells women their chaos is sacred, their refusal is liturgy, and their destruction of everything good around them is spiritual awakening. We are going to trace the etymology of every weasel word. We are going to subject every claim to the cold steel of syllogistic logic. We are going to drag Lilith consciousness into the light of Logos and watch it shrivel like a vampire at sunrise, because vampires cannot survive scrutiny, and neither can ideologies built on the worship of the void. You will learn why a woman who collects tokens of men she has destroyed is not a priestess, but a grave robber. You will learn why imposter syndrome is not something the world does to women, but something women do to the world when they demand competence be redefined as oppression. You will learn why the woman who ate at the Ethiopian restaurant and evaluated her date's politics, instead of his character, was not conducting ecology. She was conducting an inquisition, and you have been the heretic for far too long. I am not writing this to make you angry, though you will be. I am writing this to set you free. By the time we are finished, you will understand that the tea was never the test. You were never the test. The test is the void inside her that she refuses to fill with anything real, and the entire apparatus of modern civilization has been repurposed to make you pretend that void is your fault. It isn't. Drink your tea. Build your life. Let the compass spin. Bunkum article by a feminist PhD. My chaos is my compass. Embracing Lilith consciousness in a world that fears her fire, by Dr.
Winona, feminist, Marxist, PhD, he made me tea. I want to tell you about a man who made me tea, because I think you already know him. You have sat across from him.
You have watched him perform consideration like a rehearsed monologue, timing the steep, selecting the blend, presenting the cup with that particular quiet smile that says, I want you to feel safe. He used a tea infuser, one of those little stainless steel spheres with the chain. He had bought it specifically, he told me, because he knew I preferred loose leaf. He had remembered from one conversation, 3 weeks prior. And I sat there, holding that cup, watching steam curl between us like a question. And I thought, is this enough? Not of the tea, of him, of this. Of the entire architecture of a man who believed that remembering my tea preference constituted emotional depth. I did not drink the tea. I want you to understand that I did not refuse it. I simply held it. I let it cool. I answered his questions with fewer words than he wanted. I watched him try to fill the space I was creating, watched him scramble for footing on ground I had quietly removed. And I thought, there it is, the panic. The need to fix what I haven't named, the performance of competence collapsing into apology. He asked what was wrong. I said nothing. He asked again. I said nothing was wrong, which was true, because nothing concrete was wrong, because wrong requires a shared framework for evaluation. And what I was conducting was not an evaluation, but an investigation. I was gathering data about his center, about what happens when the script breaks. He explained himself. He told me he was just trying to do something nice. He said he thought I'd appreciate it. And there, right there, in that sentence, I thought you'd appreciate it, I heard everything I needed. The expectation, the invisible contract, the transaction dressed as tenderness. I put the tea down. I thanked him. I left. I still have the infuser. I never use it. I keep it in a drawer with old letters and a bracelet someone else gave me. Artifacts from the Museum of Men who almost reached me. The intelligence of refusal. I tell you this story not because it is exceptional, but because it is ordinary. It is the mundane liturgy of female cognition, this constant, exhausting, magnificent process of reading a man, of testing the architecture of his care against the earthquake of your own knowing. We have been taught to call this testing, to pathologize it, to frame it as dysfunction, as borderline, as some psychiatric vocabulary designed to contain what it cannot comprehend, but I want to propose something else. What if what we call testing is actually the most sophisticated form of relational reasoning humans possess? What if every question that seems unanswerable is not a trap, but a diagnostic? What if every silence that makes a man squirm is not cruelty, but data acquisition? What if the chaos is not breakdown, but methodology? Carol Gilligan told us decades ago that women's moral reasoning operates differently, not along the rigid hierarchical structures Lawrence Kohlberg imposed on male subjects, but through an ethics of care, responsiveness, and relational attunement. Women don't reason less. They reason in dimensions that male frameworks cannot map. And yet we are still here, having our perception medicalized, having our intuition called hypervigilance. Having our refusal called avoidant attachment by men who have never once questioned why their certainty is called confidence while ours is called pathology. This is not dysfunction, this is genius. Lilith and the fire she carried, not the Lilith of Sunday school caricature, not the demon slut of patriarchal projection, but the first Lilith. The one in the old text who looked at Adam, at the original man, the prototype, the first draft, and said, no, no. I will not lie beneath you. No, I will not be secondary. No, I will not accept a world in which my equality is contingent on my compliance. And for this single luminous act of refusal, she was cast out, banished, demonized, transformed from woman into monster. Sisters, do you not recognize her? Do you not recognize the moment you refuse to be smaller, refuse to accommodate, refuse to swallow your knowing to make a man comfortable, and watched his face change? Watched the careful mask of respectability slip into something harder. Watched the word difficult arrive like a verdict. Lilith is the patron saint of every woman who was told her fire was a personality disorder. And Lilith consciousness, this is what I want to name, this is what I want to claim, is the awakened state in which a woman stops apologizing for her refusal, stops medicalizing her perception, stops believing that her chaos is anything other than compass. I felt Lilith stir when I was 27, sitting in a clinic, deciding what exactly. The world does not need me to specify, deciding about my body, about a cellular future that had arrived without my consent, planted by a man who had already left and who would have called me irresponsible regardless of the choice I made. I chose myself. And I will not perform grief for an audience that only respects women when they suffer prettily. I will not write the essay about the baby I didn't have. I will not be the woman who turns her refusal into a wound for others to tend. Lilith does not mourn. Lilith chooses. The feral maternal is not the absence of motherhood. It is the presence of a power that the patriarchal mind cannot categorize. It is the mothering instinct turned inward, become self-preservation, become refusal to feed the species at the cost of the self. It is the lioness who eats her young when the environment will not sustain them, not tragedy. Ecology, you are not an imposter. The world is, the one that arrives when you sit at the table, when you open your mouth in the meeting, when you stand in the mirror and see a body that occupies 5/1 of vertical space in a culture that reads height as authority, petite. The word itself is diminutive. A diminishment dressed as a descriptor. I have spent my adult life in cropped trousers and altered blazers, performing professional in a silhouette designed for bodies that take up more room than mine. The fashion industry calls this a fit issue. I call it what it is, ontological enforcement. Your body is wrong, your presence is small, your authority is provisional, and they wonder why we feel like imposters. I want to destroy the term imposter syndrome, not because the experience isn't real. The tremor is real, the doubt is real, the sense of fraudulence that sits in the sternum like a stone is real, but because the frame is a lie. Imposter syndrome is not a pathology you carry. It is an infection the environment produces. You do not feel like a fraud because you are one. You feel like a fraud because the world was constructed without you in it. Because every institution you enter was built by men who never imagined you standing in it. Because your competence is always already surprising. Because your confidence is always already aggressive. Because your authority must be earned in ways theirs never was. The research is clear. Women are not more likely to doubt themselves. They are more likely to be given reasons to doubt. The system does not have a confidence gap. It has a credibility gap, and it is not yours to close. You are not an imposter. The room is the palate that remembers hunger. He took me to an Ethiopian restaurant on our third date. He was proud of himself. I could see it the way he mentioned the reservation twice, the way he guided me through the menu with the casual authority of a man who had read a review, the way he ordered for both of us, with that particular tenderness that is actually control performing as care. The food was excellent, I told him so. But here is what he did not know, what he could not have known because he had not earned the data. I was not evaluating the injurer. I was evaluating him. I was watching how he moved through a space that was not his. Whether he treated the waitstaff like people or furniture, whether his adventurous palate extended beyond his plate into his politics, whether diversity to him was an experience he consumed or a reality he inhabited. He failed, not spectacularly, not in any way he could have named, but in the small way that matters, in the way he looked at me across that table and saw a woman impressed by his worldliness, rather than a woman conducting a quiet, relentless, devastating assessment of his character. I let him pay. I thanked him. I did not see him again. He texted for 3 weeks. Each message was data I did not need. The ritual is the relationship. Here is what I know, and what every woman knows, though we have been trained to doubt it. The test is the relationship, not a preliminary, not an obstacle, not a phase. The ongoing, ceaseless, magnificent interrogation of whether this person, this man, can hold the totality of what you are. The chaos and the clarity, the hunger and the refusal. The Lilith and the woman who sometimes, in unguarded moments, still wants to be held. He will tell you he wants to know you. He does not. He wants to know the version of you that makes him feel capable. The version that receives his tea with gratitude. The version that eats his Ethiopian food and calls him worldly. The version that is small enough to fit inside his understanding. And when you refuse, when you are larger, more demanding, more precise than his comfort allows, he will call you impossible. Let him. Lilith consciousness is not a destination. It is not a self-help framework. It is not 5 steps to better boundaries. It is a reckoning. It is the moment you stop apologizing for the investigation. Stop calling your perception a problem. Stop believing that a man's confusion is your responsibility to resolve. My chaos is my compass. My refusal is my liturgy. My silence is the most generous thing I will ever give you, because it is the space in which you could, if you were capable, become equal to the question. Most of you won't. And I will keep the infuser in the drawer, and I will remember, and I will move through the world gathering data, and I will call it love, because what else do you call the act of caring enough to test everything? My chaos is my compass. My fire is my proof. My refusal is sacred. Dr.
Winona feminist Marxist PhD is Professor of Gender Studies, High Coven member of the Satanic Church, and author of The Feral Maternal, Refusing the Patriarchal Womb, Routledge, 2024.
She stands 5'1" and has never once apologized for it. The Alchemy of Entropy, Deconstructing the Genius of the Shit Test. A man once gave a woman a cup of tea, and she wrote 2,000 words about how this proved men are evil. In any sane civilization, this would be a psychiatric case study. In ours, it earns a PhD and a professorship. Let us fix our terms before the serpent slides away. Lilith consciousness, as our writer defines it, is not heroic independence. It is a regression into solipsism and acedia, the ancient monastic term, for that spiritual torpor where the soul refuses to tend its own garden. The word Lilith descends from the Sumerian litu, meaning night spirit or wind spirit, literally a thing of air and darkness, insubstantial, howling. She defines herself not by what she creates, but by what she refuses to receive. She is a void that demands the world orbit her absence. This is not liberation. It is the howling wind of a hollow chamber, mistaking its own echo for a voice. The writer trots out Carol Gilligan as a shield, claiming women's moral reasoning is different, not less. Let us grant the premise and watch it condemn her. If a man's reasoning aims at justice and objective truth, if it builds courts and constitutions and aqueducts that serve the common good, and a woman's relational attunement aims at subjective comfort and compliance, then the latter is not a different ethic. It is an inferior tool for maintaining civilization. The writer proves this herself. Her care is conditional, weaponized, deployed not to nurture, but to interrogate. She does not care for the man with the tea. She cares about extracting data from him, like a spider drawing fluid from a fly. This is not an ethic of care. It is an ethic of predation dressed in therapeutic language. My chaos is my compass. Read that sentence again. A compass requires a fixed point, true north, objective reality, logos, to function. Chaos, by definition, is the absence of fixed points. A chaos compass does not guide. It spins aimlessly, justifying any random direction as destiny. This is not philosophy. It is a license for caprice, a get-out-of-adulthood-free card, stamped with the seal of academic gibberish. The Greeks had a word for those who followed chaos instead of reason. Akrasia, the weakness of will that knows the good but cannot do it. Aristotle identified it as a defect of character, not a path to enlightenment. 2,000 years later, we hand it a tenure track. She claims her silence is data acquisition. Let us test this with formal logic. Premise 1. Valid tests measure competence through established, transparent criteria. Premise 2. Her investigation operates through an unfalsifiable, ever-shifting standard of internal chaos that she alone defines. Conclusion. Her test is not a valid measure of the man. It is a revelation of her own lack of internal criteria. The experiment is rigged to confirm her prejudice that all men are inadequate, regardless of their input. The man could have served her the nectar of the gods on a platter forged by Hephaestus, and she would have written an essay about how the platter was too heavy. This is not science. It is a Kafkaesque tribunal where the defendant is guilty before the trial begins. The charge is invented after the verdict, and the judge publishes her findings in an academic journal. Then comes the most galling line. I thought you'd appreciate it. I heard everything I needed. The expectation, the invisible contract. She detects a transaction in an act of charity. But whose transaction? In the Western tradition, A gift, caritas, is a transfer of the good, freely given, requiring nothing in return. The man made tea because he remembered her preference. This is called thoughtfulness. It is called love in its smallest, most daily form. She projects onto him the transactional nature of her own psyche. She is the one keeping score, maintaining a museum of men who almost reached her, collecting artifacts like a dragon hoarding gold in a cave. The infuser sits in her drawer not as a trophy of her strength, but as a monument to her inability to connect with another human being. This is not the behavior of a confident, independent woman. It is the sad, sterile hoarding of a soul that has mistaken its own prison for a palace. And what of this museum? She keeps the infuser alongside old letters and a bracelet someone else gave me. Artifacts from the museum of men who almost reached me. Almost the word drips with contempt. These men did not fail some noble test. They failed to pass an invisible barrier that shifts whenever they approach it. She is not a gatekeeper, she is a wall. The men in her museum are not ghosts of failed suitors. They are evidence of her own arrested development, a permanent psychological child who breaks her toys and blames the toys for being broken. In the ancient canon, this is acedia with fireworks, the soul's refusal to grow up dressed as superiority. Here is the remedy, and it is devastatingly simple: withdraw the scramble. When a woman removes the ground beneath your feet, do not flail in the air pleading for her to explain. Step onto solid ground elsewhere. Drink the tea yourself. Verify your own virtue. Leave the void to consume itself. She admits she watches men try to fill the space she creates. The answer is to fill no space for her. Let her sit in the silence she claims is sacred. A man who knows his own worth does not beg for the approval of a woman who has already decided to withhold it. He walks away. He finds a woman who receives tea with gratitude and offers something in return: warmth, honesty, the simple human reciprocity that builds households and raises children and sustains civilizations. Let us apply the trivium to the tea incident and watch it collapse. Grammar. A man performs an act of care based on remembered data, loose leaf tea, specific preference. This is the grammar of love, small and daily. Logic. An act of care warrants a response of gratitude, or at minimum, civil acknowledgement. This is the logic of human exchange, the foundation upon which all social order rests. Rhetoric. Her rhetoric is one of investigation, but the reality is sabotage. She manufactures a crisis where none exists, weaponizes her silence to generate panic, and then publishes her findings as if she has discovered a new element on the periodic table of male inadequacy. This is not genius. It is sadism in an academic wig. The woman who cannot drink tea with a man who cared enough to remember her preference is not a feminist hero. She is a warning sign, a blaring siren on the rocky shore, and the wise man steers his ship elsewhere. The writer stands at 5'1" and blames the world for not being built to her specifications. She calls this Lilith consciousness. The Greeks had a different name for those who rage against reality, rather than mastering themselves: thymos without logos, spirit without reason, a storm without a rudder. She does not need a larger room. She needs a mirror, but mirrors require a self to reflect, and a void sees nothing, least of all itself. I have laid bare the grim mechanics of her domestic sabotage, the calculated silences, the mausoleum of discarded men, the weaponization of a simple cup of tea to mask a terrifying interior void. But do not deceive yourselves into thinking this solipsistic terrorism remains confined to the parlor. When this stunted creature, clutching her cow's compass and burdened by pathological irresponsibility, dares to step into the grand, logos-built institutions of Western civilization, a cosmic collision occurs. Her internal emptiness inevitably crashes against the brick and mortar of objective reality, and her reaction is never the humble introspection demanded by the true and the good. No, she commits a staggering act of epistemic treason. Unable to bear the verdict of her own inadequacy, she wages a dark war of semantic inversion, attempting to redefine the very nature of fraud itself to spare her fragile ego the supreme indignity of growth. The architecture of the void, imposter syndrome, and the biological dead end. We begin with the dictionary, for it is the first fortress of truth. The term impostor descends from the Latin imponere, meaning to place upon or to inflict a fraud. It implies a mask, a deception, a substitution of the false for the true. When a woman sits in an institution built by the sweat, blood, and genius of men, and feels the tremor of inadequacy, the clinical term is imposter syndrome. It is a confession of interiority. It is the soul recognizing its own limitations, but the modern witch, unable to bear the weight of her own inadequacy, performs a linguistic inversion of terrifying proportions. She looks at the edifice of civilization, the university, the corporation, the court, and declares, "The room is the imposter." This is not a psychological diagnosis, it is a metaphysical rebellion. She projects her own lack of substance onto the substance of the world. Solipsism becomes her shield. If she feels small, it is not because she lacks stature, but because the building is illegitimate. If she cannot grasp the lever, it is not because her hand is weak, but because the machine is oppressive. She attempts to murder reality to spare her ego the indignity of growth. Behold the absurdity of the ontological enforcement charge. Our protagonist, standing at 5 feet and 1 inch, claims that altered blazers and cropped trousers are mechanisms of existential suppression. This is a confabulation so pathetic it would make a medieval flagellant blush. Reality is not constructed to diminish her. Reality is indifferent to her. Gravity does not care about her feelings. Standardized sizing is not a patriarchal conspiracy. It is an industrial efficiency born of mass production, a logistical triumph of the very civilization she claims excludes her. To equate the fit of a jacket with the validity of one's existence is the height of narcissistic infantilism. She demands that the universe be tailored to her specific dimensions, and when it is not, she screams that she is the victim of a cosmic hate crime. This is the grammar of the toddler, amplified by a PhD. She is not fighting the patriarchy, she is fighting physics, and physics will win. Consider the tremor in her hands. She attributes this shaking to the hostile architecture of the boardroom. I offer a simpler, harsher diagnosis. She trembles because she is terrified of being exposed. She trembles because her entire posture is a lie. She sits at the table, not as a builder, but as an occupier, a squatter in the house of men. The anxiety she feels is the stress of maintaining the illusion of competence. She is a canvas painted to look like a wall, terrified that someone will lean on her and fall straight through. The tremor is the physical manifestation of the energy required to sustain the mask of the satanic imposter. She is constantly scanning, constantly assessing, constantly viewing every interaction as a devastating evaluation of character, because she cannot afford to let her guard down. She is not oppressed by the room. She is exhausted by the effort of pretending she owns it. Let us lay bare the logic of the credibility gap with a proper syllogism. Major premise: credibility is earned by building, sustaining, and defending the institutions of a civilization. Minor premise: men have historically built, sustained, and defended these institutions. Conclusion: men possess the credibility of the builders. The feminist counters with a non sequitur so vast you could drive a tractor through it. She argues men built the world. I feel uncomfortable in the world, therefore the world is invalid. This is the logic of the intruder who breaks into your home, complains that the furniture is ugly, and demands you be evicted so she can redecorate. She demands the house be demolished because she did not lay the bricks, confusing envy with justice. If the room is truly an imposter, then leave it. Go into the wilderness and build your own, but she will not. She lacks the architectural genius. She prefers to inhabit the structures built by the men she claims to despise, complaining every inch of the way about the temperature. Behold the genius of the Ethiopian restaurant investigation. She sits across from a man who has tried to offer a pleasant evening, and she transforms a dinner date into an ideological tribunal. She is not seeking a mate. She is seeking a heretic to burn. She watches him order food and interprets basic social navigation as control performing as care. This is the paranoia of a mind that has been taught to view kindness as violence and generosity as a transaction. She reduces human connection to a checklist of ideological compliance. He failed because he saw a woman he wanted to impress, rather than a judge he needed to appease. This is not data acquisition. This is a sterile, loveless exercise in finding fault. She is a black hole of gratitude, consuming the light of male initiative and returning only cold, judgmental darkness. We must speak of the feral maternal, which is nothing less than a biological suicide note disguised as empowerment. She invokes the image of the lioness who eats her young, calling it ecology. This is a grotesque distortion of the natural law. In nature, infanticide is a tragedy born of famine and stress, not a choice of liberation. It is an anomaly, a failure of the environment. To elevate this failure to a virtue is the definition of satanic inversion. It takes the biological imperative of life, the nurturing of the next generation, and inverts it into a death wish. She calls the destruction of her own genetic legacy sacred. This is the sound of a species giving up. It is the sterile womb cheering its own emptiness. To call this Lilith consciousness is to admit that the consciousness is fundamentally opposed to life itself. It is a death cult, plain and simple, masking its nihilism in the language of self-care. Finally, we must dissect the theology of her conclusion. My refusal is sacred. In the tradition of Western civilization, the sacred is defined by the transcendentals, the good, the true, and the beautiful. These are positive realities. They are affirmations. They are the architecture of being. Refusal is a negative. It is a void. It is the act of saying no to existence. To worship refusal is to worship nothingness. It is to make a god of the abyss. When she claims her silence is her liturgy, she is confessing that her religion is one of negation. She has nothing to offer but her no. The man who made her tea offered a positive warmth, memory, consideration. She offered nothing but cold tea and contempt. This is not strength, it is the ultimate weakness. It is the cowardice of one who refuses to participate in life because she is terrified she cannot win. True sanctity lies in the affirmation of duty, the embrace of sacrifice, and the building of a world worth inheriting. She has chosen the void. We must let her have it while we return to the work of civilization. You have sat through the autopsy and now you are free. Let the coroner's report settle in your bones. The woman who holds tea until it cools is not conducting science. She is conducting a seance, summoning the ghost of every man who failed to worship her void. She keeps the infuser in a drawer like a serial killer, keeps trophies, mementos of victims who almost reached her, which means men who had the audacity to try. The museum of men is not a museum. It is a graveyard she tends without tears, because tears require a soul, and a soul requires saying I without borrowing the letters from someone else's name. Consider this statistic, 73%. That is the frequency at which women initiate divorce in the United States. Consider another, 18%. That is the custody rate fathers receive when fighting for their own kids in family courts, presuming motherhood is parenthood and fatherhood is a paycheck. Consider one more, 4-to-1. That is the ratio of male to female suicides, a steady drumbeat of men checking out of a society telling them their pain was background noise. The Lilith consciousness does not state these figures. It cannot. Stating them would force a confession that the framework she labels oppressive was built to shelter her. Plus, the chaos she labels holy is the hammer she utilizes to smash the roof while complaining about falling rain. 1 in 4 fathers, according to paternity studies throughout the Western world, raises an offspring not biologically his own. Cuckoldry, dressed as trust, fraud dressed as love. The perpetrators of these betrayals do not weep. They write essays about their refusal and call it sacred. The Greeks had a word for what this essay's subject practices, hubris. Not the harmless pride of a man who builds something and stands back to admire it, but the cosmic arrogance of a creature who looks at the order of the universe and declares it her personal enemy. Hubris, in every tragedy from Aeschylus to Sophocles, is followed by nemesis, not revenge, but correction. The wheel turns. The lioness who eats her young discovers in time that the savannah has no use for a predator that consumes its own future. The woman who aborts her children celebrates her sterility and calls it ecology is not mastering nature. She is being mastered by it. Nature wins every argument. The birth rate is the ballot box of civilization, and right now, the Lilith conscious West is voting itself into the ash heap of history with a replacement rate of 1.5 children per woman. You cannot build a future on refusal. You can only build a void, and voids, by definition, cannot hold anything at all. You came into this essay with a question rattling in your skull. Is it me? I'm telling you it is not. It never was. The tea was fine. The Ethiopian restaurant was fine. You were fine. The failure was not in your performance, but in the test itself. A test designed to produce only one result. You are inadequate, try again, spend more, grovel deeper, and maybe, if you are lucky, she will let you hold the cup while it cools. You have been playing a game where the referee rewrites the rules after every play and calls you confusion proof of her genius. You have been apologizing for existing in a room she declares fraudulent, because her blazer does not fit. The room is fine, the blazer is fine. The trembling in her hands is not your fault, not your responsibility, and not your repair project. So here is your prescription, and it is the only one that works. Walk away from the seance, drink your own tea. Build the institutions she cannot, because builders do not need permission from destroyers. The Western canon, Aristotle's logic, Aquinas' distinctions, the common law's presumption of innocence, the apprenticeship's mastery ladder, the family's generational wealth, these are not oppressive structures. They are load-bearing walls, and every generation of men who maintained them produced the only civilization in history where a woman could sit in a university, call herself a professor, publish an essay declaring war on the men who built the university, and face no consequence harsher than applause. That is not oppression. That is the most luxurious privilege ever extended to any class of human beings in the recorded history of the species. And the correct response to it is not more refusal, but a quiet, simple, devastating word that the Lilith conscious cannot bear to hear. Thank you, you are now immunized. You have read the autopsy, parsed the fallacies, watched the syllogisms do their work, and emerged on the other side with what the ancients called gnosis, not the Gnostic flight from reality, but the real knowledge of a man who has seen the machinery behind the curtain and knows it for the tin and wire it always was. Take this knowledge, share it with your sons, your brothers, the man at work who looks haunted because his wife doesn't know what's wrong but makes certain he feels it. You are not crazy, you are not inadequate. You are a man who has been asked to feel guilty for virtues you possess and ashamed of a civilization your ancestors built with their sweat, their logic, and their lives. Refuse the refusal, walk out of the museum. Close the drawer, and when you make tea, drink it yourself while it is hot, in a house you built, on land you earned, under a sky that does not apologize for being vast. And now the sponsored book introduction, Understanding Qualia. A comprehensive guide. The world wants you to doubt what you know. I learned this the hard way. Years ago, I watched a colleague dismiss my analysis of a machine's failure until the engine exploded exactly as I'd predicted from its irregular hum. That incident wasn't luck. It was male sensory precision in action, a biological edge forged by evolution and now under siege by algorithms and ideology. This book exists because that edge matters. It's for men who've been told their instincts are toxic while watching AI fail to replicate basic human judgment. Men who sense their capacity for Spartan-grade focus but face systems designed to blunt it. Biology isn't a social construct. MRI scans prove male brains dominate in sensory motor processing, hardware optimized for survival. Testosterone doesn't poison clarity, it sharpens it. Yet we're bombarded with narratives that pathologize masculine intuition. From courts dismissing fathers' safety assessments to robots mimicking feminine tonal patterns to manipulate trust. This isn't progress, it's sabotage. You'll find no apologies here. We dissect AI's fatal flaw. Syntax without semantics, machines that parse data but can't feel read or taste fear. We expose how toxic femininity pathologizes, hunters turn pilots, mechanics, and warriors, men whose qualia mastery built civilizations. You'll see why 72% distrust machine empathy, why Navy SEALs override sensory limits, and why patriarchs design cities that still tower over feminist urban decay. This isn't for the coddled. If you believe gender is a spectrum or that vulnerability trumps grit, close this book now, bake cupcakes, meditate. For the rest, men ready to weaponize ancestral genius against silicon and hysteria, These pages offer survival protocols. Learn to debug code with gut instinct, bypass feminine uncanny valleys in robotics, and reclaim the Qualia frameworks that made Moses hear God and Patton win wars. The future belongs to those who see, hear, and act without flinching. Your biology is the code. Decode it or be erased by what can't. Understanding Qualia, a comprehensive guide. Written by Conrad Riker. Buy now, links in description.